Hi, I'm Leona Durnin. I'm a software development manager at Prometric. And just about a year ago, I was given the task of working out how to get all of the Prometric content into Surpass. Sounds like a very boring data migration project. But as we started to dig a little deeper into some of the challenges around the data, it was clear it wasn't going to be a straightforward migration. Write a few scripts, few programs, everybody come in some weekend, run them all, get the data over, and come in the next Monday, and all the test developers are starting to work in the new system. So we were looking at content belonging to 175 of our clients, and we have I think it's about 4,000 or 5,000 exams, and altogether just under 1 million items. So it's a pretty substantial migration exercise. Some of the problems we had around it was the fact that not all of our data was in one place. So it's not the first time Prometric had moved from one content item bank to another. So other migrations obviously didn't work that successful because they left data behind in previous banks. So we had at least 3 different databases to take content from. But it was never going to be the kind of thing where you would come in the next day and start off in Surpass, because we have clients who are in different phases of publishing. There's continuous testing, and we were going to have to kind of pick it all off bit by bit and properly prioritize the working with our clients so they could get trained and get to understand the system as well before we moved their content over. So there's a huge operational task, I guess, working with our clients as well to help them understand the new system too before we went to some of the problems we had as well about moving data, and I guess our considerations were, when we looked at specific exams, is whether Surpass already supported the content that we were trying to move. So there was quite a large exercise in trying to understand what were the features that we supported for each different client so that we could work out what clients to start moving first. So obviously you can't move data for features that are not already supported in Surpass. So at the same time as writing the migration scripts and migration tools, we had to consider increasing features in Surpass and when those features will be available, and also creating an API for us to use to get the data into Surpass. So as new features became available in Surpass, we had to be able to then automatically write into those new features as well. So the API had to be developed and augmented to accept the data for the exams that we had. So some of the big problems we saw was the fact that a lot of our build files, we decided to migrate from our build files, not necessarily directly from the item banks themselves. Some of the exams we have, we didn't even have the data for in the item banks, so we started to work with the build files. But within those build files was HTML data. A lot of it was badly formed, so it took a lot of development to get past some of those issues and try to understand, where the errors were, was like missing image tags or missing paragraph tags and that. And the data, depending on who had developed the data, obviously could have been inconsistent. Not being able to migrate content for unsupported features obviously led to us having to develop a system that was that could be flexible, that you could choose which client or which exam you wanted to migrate next, rather than just kind of start at the top and work your way through. So we had to give the data migrators the flexibility to choose which exams they were going to migrate. But one big problem for us, I guess, was starting with a schema. Within Prometric, we have data for lots of different clients. So within that schema, you would have the client, you'd have their programs and their exams. But within Surpass, there was the assumption that everything within the item bank belongs to the one person. So we had a real challenge in trying to get that data, that client representation, modelled in a database that didn't support that, that entity. So we ended up using the centres to represent clients as well as sites. So that becomes a bit complex as you're integrating other systems. But and then we had kind of other ways of representing items. So, for example, a survey item was developed as an item that didn't have a correct answer. So, yeah, when you go to migrate that into Surpass, you find you're not allowed to have an item without an answer. So it was kind of trying to pick out those pieces of data that were going to cause problems and give then the person who was going to migrate the data the option to determine whether that was actually a bad item or whether it was a survey item. So a lot of the development of the migration went into giving the person who was going to migrate the data the flexibility to choose what to migrate and whether or not to migrate particular items, depending on whether they could determine if it was an error or a different representation. So this is what we ended up developing to actually migrate the data. So we had, as I said, multiple item banks, and we also had clients whose data that we needed to import who weren't in our own item banks. And we chose at that point then to move over to Excel and start loading the data up through Excel. And as you know, Surpass has its own Excel data uploader, but it lacked some of the features that we needed to bring into, belonging to items that we needed to bring into the item bank. So we wrote a loader that would allow you to do things like add image options or have dynamic tag creation against against an item, set some of the core tag values like learning outcomes. So that worked well for loading up data that was outside of our item banks. And so now we have the flexibility within the tool to choose whether we want to export from our own item banks into the Excel format and upload from there, or whether we want to take those build files directly, read the HTML, extract the data, and create it in Surpass. So there was a tracking database associated with it, so that if you go to upload an item that has already been created, it'll be recognized as a duplicate. And it uses the Surpass content API. So the API itself has gone through a dramatic change over the last year, and the ability to use the API then gave us the flexibility to get data into Surpass. So I get part of the tool. What we had to build into it was to allow the tool to validate the data first, so that a user could go ahead and pick out any of the errors and decide which items they actually didn't want to upload. So it was all about just taking the responsibility off the development team and giving the flexibility to the content team to decide when and where from they wanted to upload data into Surpass. Okay, and so it's, as I said, it's user-driven. The exams menu item there gives access to the person who's going to migrate the data to see all of the exams we have in our existing banks and choose which one they want to migrate. But we also built in a dashboard as part of that tracking database so that you could work out or track how much data has been loaded so we can see where we are in the cycle. So at the moment, it's recording each month how many items get uploaded by the content team. And as you can see, there's still at the start of the exercise. But, you know, the flexibility is there for the team to migrate the items as and when features become available, so that we can move clients over. So that's it.